The river market was alive with noise and color that afternoon. Women haggling over dried fish, children chasing chickens between baskets, drums pulsing somewhere in the distance. Abeni moved through the crowd carrying a woven basket filled with palm oil and honey, gifts meant for Sadiq's family, as custom required before marriage. Then she heard it. Her song. The melody she had composed in secret, whispered to Sadiq under moonlight, words born from her own heart. But the voice singing it was not hers. It rang out clear and joyful, accompanied by drums and hand claps, spreading through the market like wildfire. Abeni's feet stopped moving. Her blood turned cold. She turned slowly, following the sound, pushing through the gathering crowd. People were celebrating something, their faces bright with excitement. The drums grew louder, the singing intensified. Then the crowd parted like water, and Abeni saw him. Sadiq stood in the center of the market square, his body marked with red chalk in ceremonial patterns, cowrie shells braided into his hair, wearing the wrapper reserved for grooms on their wedding day. He was smiling, radiant, complete, beside another woman. The girl beside Sadiq could not have seen more than 16 harvests. Her face was round and innocent, still holding the softness of childhood, despite the bride's beads circling her waist. She gazed up at Sadiq with wonder, as if he had hung the sun specifically for her. The crowd cheered as an elder stepped forward to bless them, speaking words Abeni knew by heart, because those words were supposed to be spoken over her. The basket slipped from Abeni's numb fingers. Palm oil spilled across the dirt, fish scattered. The sound of shattering pottery cut through the celebration for just a moment. A few heads turned. Some faces registered recognition. Shock, pity, awkward amusement. Then the laughter started. Not cruel exactly, but careless. The kind of laughter that accompanies gossip too juicy to keep quiet. "Is that not the first one?" someone whispered loudly. "The one he kept waiting?" Another voice. Shame. She must not have known. The young bride, noticing the commotion, turned towards Sadiq with a question in her eyes. He whispered something that made her smile, then spoke loud enough for all to hear. "My wife asked who you are. I told her you were nobody important." The crowd erupted in fresh celebration. Abeni stood frozen as the girl called Sadiq my husband with such easy confidence, claiming in 2 words what Abeni had spent 3 years earning. Abeni waited until darkness fell before going to Sadiq's compound. She found him alone, counting coins by lamplight, still wearing traces of the red chalk. He looked up when she entered, his face showing no surprise, no shame, no recognition of what he had done. "You should not be here," he said simply, returning to his counting. "You married someone else," Abeni whispered, her voice strange in her own ears. "In public, using my song, while I carried gifts for your mother." Sadiq set down the coins with a sigh, as if she were a child requiring tedious explanation. "I needed a woman who would lift me higher. Someone whose family has land, whose father has connections. You were kind, Abeni, and patient, but you were only meant to wait." The words landed like stones. Wait for what? For me to be ready. You kept me comfortable while I prepared for my real life. He stood, adjusting his wrapper. "Do not make this dramatic. You were useful once, now you are not." Abeni's legs nearly gave out. 3 years, Sadiq. I fed you when you had nothing, defended you when others mocked your failures. And I am grateful, he interrupted, voice flat. But gratitude is not obligation. He moved toward the door, pausing before he left. "The elders approved this marriage yesterday. It is done. Go home." By morning, the entire village knew, not just about the marriage, but about Abeni's humiliation at the market, her broken basket, her stunned face. The story spread like illness, growing more embarrassing with each retelling. Women who once sought Abeni's counsel now avoided her eyes at the well. Her closest friend, Yetunde, crossed to the other side of the path when she saw Abeni approaching. Children, cruel in their honesty, began singing a mocking version of her love song, changing the words to make her the fool. The elders spoke in concerned whispers when she passed, their message clear without words being spoken. A woman abandoned so publicly must have done something to anger the spirits. Perhaps she was cursed. Perhaps she carried bad fortune. Perhaps she deserved this. Abeni stopped going to the market, stopped attending community gatherings. She moved through the village like a ghost, present but unseen, her name becoming synonymous with caution, a warning tale mothers told daughters about trusting too much. Then, one afternoon, while sweeping her compound, she began to cough. It started small but grew violent, doubling her over. When she finally caught her breath, she looked down her palm expecting blood. Instead, she found sand, dry red sand that should not exist inside a living body. While Abeni weakened, Sadiq flourished in ways that defied explanation. Within 2 weeks of his marriage, a wealthy trader gifted him 3 portions of fertile land near the river. Livestock appeared in his compound, healthy goats and strong cattle that seemed to multiply overnight. Men who once dismissed him as foolish now sought his counsel. Women praised his wisdom. Children ran to him with respect. His compound expanded, his barns filled, his name carried weight it never held before. Meanwhile, Abeni grew thinner, her skin losing her glow, her movements becoming slow and pained. The coughing episodes increased. Sometimes she would wake choking on that impossible sand, her throat raw, her chest tight with pressure that had no visible cause. Her appetite vanished. Food tasted like ash. Water brought no relief. She caught her reflection in a bronze mirror one evening and barely recognized the hollow-eyed woman staring back. That night, the dreams began. She stood in a dark place where drums beat from inside wooden coffins buried just beneath her feet. The rhythm was frantic, desperate, as if something trapped wanted desperately to be freed. She tried to run, but her feet were rooted. She tried to scream, but sand poured from her mouth. She awoke gasping, drenched in sweat, knowing with terrible certainty this was not illness. This was something else entirely. The whispers came first during her waking hours, soft, persistent, like wind through leaves, but carrying intention. They came from no direction and every direction, words she could not quite understand but felt compelled to follow. At first, Abeni tried to ignore them. Then, one morning, she awoke to find her feet already walking, carrying her body toward the forest edge without her conscious decision. The forbidden forest, the place mothers warned children never to enter, where the boundary between the living world and the world beyond grew thin and dangerous. Abeni's rational mind screamed to turn back, but her feet continued forward, as if pulled by invisible threads. The trees grew denser, older, their roots twisted like ancient fingers grasping at earth. Light filtered strange through the canopy. Sounds that should have been there, bird calls, insect hums, fell away into oppressive silence. Then she saw it. A shrine. Small, crooked, built from bones and clay and things that might have been alive. Cowrie shells hung from branches, red cloth tied around twisted wood. And sitting before it, cross-legged and still as stone, was a woman everyone in the village feared, but no one could explain why. The mad shrine woman. She looked up as Abeni approached, her eyes knowing, her smile terrible with understanding. "You are late. The debt is nearly full." The shrine woman gestured for Abeni to sit, though sitting felt like surrender to something irreversible. "You wonder why you are dying while he prospers," the woman said, not asking but stating. "You wonder what crime you committed to deserve this punishment." Abeni nodded, unable to speak. "No crime, child, only love. And love, unfortunately, can be turned into currency by those who know how." The shrine woman reached into a worn bag covered with symbols Abeni could not read. 4 years ago, your Sadiq came to these woods desperate. He had failed at farming, trading, even simple labor. Humiliation followed him like a shadow, so he sought power the way weak men do. He bargained. Abeni's throat tightened. What kind of bargain? A bloodless oath made to ancestors hungry for justice. He promised them a sacrifice, not of flesh or animal, but of spirit. He would offer them the life force, the dignity, the very essence of the woman who loved him most completely. Her tears would water his fields. Her shame would buy his respect. Her slow destruction would purchase his rise. The words settled like poison. In return, the shrine woman continued, the ancestors would grant him everything he desired. Wealth, status, a new bride from a powerful family, all of it. But the payment, she looked directly at Abeni. The payment was always going to be you. Abeni's hands trembled as understanding crashed through her like a river breaking its banks. Every kindness she had shown Sadiq, every sacrifice, every moment of unwavering support, it had all been feeding something dark and deliberate. Her love had not been cherished, it had been consumed. The more you loved him, the more power the ancestors could extract. Your loyalty became his currency. Your trust fueled his transformation. Every tear you shed in secret, every night you lay awake worrying for his future, every public humiliation you endured, all of it transferred your life force directly to him. Abeni thought of the sand she had coughed up, the drums beating in her dreams, the way her reflection had started avoiding her eyes in still water. That is why rivers turn away from you. Now, the shrine woman said, reading her thoughts, water recognizes what has been taken. Your own spirit barely recognizes itself. How long? Abeni whispered. How long do I have? The shrine woman was quiet for a moment. The debt is full. He has received everything promised. Now comes the collection. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. But here is what the ancestors did not tell him. Once the debt is full, they come not just for the payment, they come for the one who made the bargain. Sadiq's time is measured in days now, perhaps hours. He does not know it yet, but his body already belongs to them. Abeni sat in stunned silence, trying to process the terrible fairness of it. Sadiq would pay. But so had she. So was she, still. There is a choice before you, the shrine woman said carefully. One that will determine not just his fate, but yours. She produced a small wooden bowl filled with water that reflected no light. Speak forgiveness over this water. Mean it fully, from a heart cleansed of all anger. If you do, the ancestors must honor it. The debt will be considered paid by your mercy. Sadiq will live, prosper, and never face consequences for what he has done. His new wife will bear him children. His name will be praised. He will die old and comfortable, having escaped justice entirely. Abeni felt something cold settle in her stomach. And if I do not forgive him, then you do nothing. Say nothing. Let the ancestors finish what Sadiq started. They will collect him publicly in front of everyone in a manner that reveals all his secrets. It will be terrible to witness, but it will also restore what was taken from you, your strength, your name, your life force. Everything will return. The shrine woman's eyes glittered, but understand, they are already restless, already moving, already preparing the collection. If you choose silence, there is no stopping what comes next. She pushed the bowl toward Abeni. Mercy or justice? Only you can decide, but decide quickly. The ancestors do not wait. Abeni returned to the village in a daze, the choice pressing down on her like physical weight. That evening, strange signs began appearing that others should have noticed but somehow dismissed as coincidence. The river that had always flowed past Sadiq's compound changed its course overnight, creating a wide berth around his property, as if the water refused to touch his land. His livestock began acting strange, goats bleating at empty air, cattle refusing to enter his barn, chickens gathering in nervous clusters far from his shadow. In the night, drums sounded from nowhere, their rhythm unsettling and wrong, beating patterns only used for funerals. The village elders heard them, but convinced themselves it was celebration from a distant compound. Sadiq heard them too. Abeni learned this from a servant girl who whispered that the master had not slept properly in 3 nights, that he woke gasping from dreams he would not describe, that he had begun checking the compound obsessively, as if searching for something hiding just out of sight. His new wife noticed too. She asked him what troubled him. He struck her for the first time then, not hard, but sharp, and told her never to question him. The girl had been too frightened to ask again. Abeni listened to all this while standing at her doorway, feeling the choice pressing closer. The bowl of water sat wrapped in cloth inside her home, waiting. The ancestors were circling now, patient but inevitable, like vultures awaiting permission to descend. 3 days after Abeni's visit to the shrine, Sadiq's young wife appeared at her door. The girl's face was swollen from crying, her hands shaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please," she said, "I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know what my marriage cost you, but I need you to know I did not know about you, about the promises he made, about any of it." Abeni stood silent in her doorway, studying the girl who had replaced her. "He told me you were a distant cousin who had moved away. He said you had married someone else and were very happy. When I saw you at the market, when he called you nobody, I felt something was wrong. But by then we were already married, already blessed by the elders, already—" Her voice broke. "I am carrying his child." The words hung between them. Abeni felt something twist in her chest. Not jealousy exactly, but a terrible sadness for this girl who had become tangled in threads she never saw being woven. "He is having nightmares," the girl whispered. "Terrible ones. He wakes screaming about death and ancestors and things I do not understand. Yesterday, he locked himself in the room for hours, praying to spirits I have never heard him acknowledge before. He is afraid, and I do not know why, and I—" She looked up at Abeni with desperate eyes. "Please, whatever is happening, if there is anything you can do, I am begging you. I carry an innocent life." The shrine woman appeared at Abeni's compound that same evening, materializing from shadows as if she had always been there. "Time grows short," she said without greeting. "The ancestors have set the date for collection. It will happen publicly in 3 days' time during the celebration Sadiq is planning." Abeni's blood chilled. What celebration? He has announced a grand festival to honor his coming fatherhood and continued prosperity. The entire village is invited. Drums, dancers, food, palm wine. He intends it as a display of power, a final declaration that he has won completely. The shrine woman's smile was bitter. The ancestors find this fitting. They will collect him in the middle of his triumph before all witnesses so that everyone will understand what happens to men who trade love for power. Abeni sat in stunned silence, thinking about the young wife, the unborn child, and the celebration becoming a horror. The girl, his wife, she is innocent. The child is innocent. The ancestors know this. The girl will be spared, though her life will not be easy. The child, the ancestors paused. That depends on timing. If he is collected before birth, the child may survive untouched. If after, the bloodline carries consequences. She pulled out the bowl of water again. "This is your final chance, Abeni. Speak forgiveness now or accept what silence brings. 3 days, then the choice is made for you." Abeni took the bowl with trembling hands. "What would you do?" she asked. The ancestors' eyes were ancient and unreadable. "I am not the one who was betrayed." For 2 days, Abeni carried the bowl of water everywhere, staring into its dark surface, searching for the right answer. She thought about mercy and what it meant. She thought about forgiveness and whether it required forgetting. She thought about the young wife's tears and the unborn child and whether their suffering should weigh heavier than her own. But she also thought about the 3 years she had given Sadiq, the love she had offered freely, genuinely, completely, the way he looked through her at the market as if she had never existed, the casual cruelty in his voice when he said she was only meant to wait, the calculated nature of his betrayal, not impulsive or passionate, but planned, deliberate, negotiated with hungry spirits. On the morning of the 3rd day, Abeni walked to the river. The water that had refused her reflection for weeks now showed her face clearly, as if sensing a decision had been made. She looked different. Thinner, yes, but also sharper, harder, someone who had been broken and was reassembling herself into a new shape. She stood there for a long time, holding the bowl of water, one word away from ending everything. Then she poured the water into the river and watched it disappear. She spoke no forgiveness. She spoke no curse. She simply said nothing at all. The river rippled strangely in response, and for just a moment, Abeni could have sworn she saw her reflection smile, not with joy, but with something older and darker, understanding perhaps, or permission. By evening, the festival drums had already begun. The celebration was magnificent, the kind of display that would be remembered for years. Sadiq had spared no expense. 3 drummers played complex rhythms that made the earth pulse. Dancers moved in formation, their bodies painted in ceremonial patterns. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted meat, fried plantains, jollof rice steaming in massive pots. Palm wine flowed freely. The entire village attended, along with visitors from neighboring communities, all drawn by Sadiq's reputation and generosity. He stood at the center of it all, resplendent in embroidered robes, his young wife wearing enough beads to announce her status clearly. He gave a speech about blessings and ancestors and how hard work always receives its reward. People cheered. Some looked at Abeni standing at the very edge of the gathering and whispered. Most had forgotten her already or chose to. The sun began setting, painting everything gold and red. The drumming intensified. Dancers spun faster. Sadiq raised a carved cup filled with palm wine, preparing to make a toast about his coming legacy, about the son he was certain his wife carried. He opened his mouth to speak. The drums stopped. Not gradually, they stopped mid-beat, as if invisible hands had frozen the drummers in place. The sudden silence was so complete it felt like violence. Every head turned, confused. Then Sadiq made a sound no one had ever heard a human make before, a shriek that tore from his throat involuntarily, animal and terrified. Sadiq's body convulsed, his carefully held cup shattering on the ground. His hands clawed at his chest as if trying to rip something from inside. His eyes rolled back, showing only whites, then snapped forward with terrible focus. When he spoke again, it was not his voice, or rather it was his voice but without his control, words pouring out in a torrent he clearly did not want to speak. I lied about everything," he screamed. "I made an oath in the forest 4 years ago. I traded Abeni's life for my success. I promised the ancestors her suffering, her love, her very spirit in exchange for wealth and status and this new wife." The crowd gasped. His young wife stumbled backward, but Sadiq was not finished. The confessions kept coming, unstoppable, each one more damning than the last. He spoke of other betrayals, debts he never paid, friends he had cheated, a child he had fathered in another village and denied, bribes he had given to elders to approve his marriage quickly. Every secret sin, every hidden shame, every calculated cruelty came spilling out in front of everyone. He fell to his knees, still screaming truths, his body shaking violently. Blood vessels burst in his eyes. His fingernails tore at the earth as if trying to dig his way into the ground. The elders tried to approach, but stopped, held back by something they could feel but not see. An invisible pressure filled the air, thick and suffocating. The wind rose suddenly, impossibly, suckling the gathering like a noose tightening. The wind brought something with it, a presence, ancient and patient, and utterly without mercy. The air grew cold despite the evening heat. Shadows moved against their natural directions, stretching toward Sadiq like dark fingers. Firelight flickered strangely. The food on the tables began to rot before people's eyes, meat turning grey, plantains collapsing into mush, the palm wine in its vessels curdled. People started backing away, some running, mothers grabbing children and fleeing. But many stayed, frozen by horror and fascination, unable to look away. Sadiq's confessions had stopped, but his screaming continued. He looked around wildly, and his eyes found Abeni standing calm and still at the crowd's edge. "Please!" he shrieked, voice cracking. "Abeni, please! Forgive me! Tell them to stop! I am sorry! I am so sorry! Please!" He crawled toward her on his hands and knees, sobbing, his fine robes dragging through dirt. "I did not understand what I was doing. I was desperate. I was foolish. Please, you are good. You are kind. You always forgave me before. Please forgive me now." The entire village turned to look at Abeni. The young wife looked at her. The elders looked at her. Even the shadows seemed to pause, waiting for her response. This was the moment, the final chance. One word of forgiveness and it would end. Sadiq would be released. The ancestors would withdraw. Everything would return to normal. Abeni opened her mouth to speak. Abeni's voice, when it came, was steady and clear, carrying across the stunned silence with unexpected strength. "I do not forgive you," she said simply, not with anger or triumph, but with the calm finality of someone stating an unchangeable fact. "Not because I am cruel, not because I want you to suffer, but because forgiveness cannot erase what was done. You did not make a mistake, Sadiq. You made a choice. You chose to trade my life for yours. You chose to feed my suffering to hungry spirits. You chose to humiliate me publicly while privately consuming my essence. You chose, again and again, for years, and now the ancestors have come to collect what you promised them. She took a step forward, and the crowd parted like water before her. You thought love made me weak. You thought my kindness was permission for your cruelty. You thought mercy was something you could demand after denying me basic dignity. Her eyes met his, and he flinched. But I am not here to save you. I am here to survive you. The ground beneath Sadiq trembled. A crack appeared in the earth beside him, thin at first, then widening. No fire emerged, no demons, nothing dramatic, just an impossible darkness that seemed to lead down forever. Sadiq scrambled away from it, but his body would not obey. His legs stopped working, his arms weakened. He lay there, half collapsed, staring up at Abeni with desperate, dying eyes, finally understanding that some debts cannot be negotiated away. What happened next was visible only to those who chose to keep watching, though later many would claim they had turned away. Sadiq's body simply collapsed inward, not violently but thoroughly, as if the force that had been animating him was suddenly withdrawn like a hand pulled from a puppet. There were no wounds, no blood, no physical explanation for what was occurring. He was simply being emptied of breath, of warmth, of the stolen life force that had been fueling his unnatural prosperity. His eyes stayed open but lost focus. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His hands reached toward nothing. The young wife screamed and tried to go to him, but the shrine woman appeared from nowhere and held her back, whispering urgently that touching him now would mean joining him. The wind died, the unnatural cold faded, the shadows returned to their proper places, and Sadiq lay in the dirt at the center of his celebration, his body still and silent, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. By dawn, witnesses would describe it differently. Some said his heart simply stopped. Others claimed they saw handprints appear on his skin, dragging him down. A few swore the earth had swallowed him briefly before spitting him back out. But everyone agreed on one thing. When they tried to move his body to prepare it for burial, it weighed nothing, as if everything inside that made him human had been removed completely, leaving only an empty shell that looked like a man, but no longer was. The elders gathered at first light to determine where Sadiq should be buried, but the earth itself refused to cooperate. Every spot they chose rejected the body. Holes dug during the night would fill themselves by morning with rocks that were not there before. Ground that seemed soft would turn hard as stone the moment his body approached. They tried the family burial ground. The soil turned to clay. They tried the community cemetery. The grave they dug filled with water that would not drain. They even tried the forest edge, thinking perhaps the spirits wanted him near where the oath had been made. The trees themselves seemed to lean away, their roots rising like barriers. By the third day, panic set in. A body that cannot be buried becomes everyone's curse. The elders who once had whispered about Abeni being spiritually tainted now understood differently. They came to her compound in a formal procession, these men who had questioned her worth and approved Sadiq's cruel marriage. They knelt, actually knelt before her door. "The ancestors are not finished," the elder said, his voice humble. "They are waiting. They are teaching. They are showing you what happens when a community chooses to look away from injustice because the person suffering is a woman and the person thriving is a man. When you make excuses for cruelty because it wears a successful face." The young wife was found 3 days after Sadiq's collapse, packing her few belongings into a worn bag. She moved stiffly, her face blank, her eyes distant. The child she had carried was gone, not miscarried but simply vanished from her womb as if it had never existed. The midwives who examined her could not explain it. Her body showed no signs of pregnancy, yet everyone remembered seeing the swell of her belly at the celebration. The shrine woman told Abeni privately what had happened. The ancestors had taken back what was conceived through stolen blessings. The bloodline could not continue. The girl would live, but she would never carry a child again, and no man would marry her after this. She was spared her life, but given a different kind of death, to live childless and alone in a society that defined women by motherhood. It seemed cruel until Abeni learned one more detail. The girl had known. Not everything, but enough. Sadiq had confessed to her weeks earlier about the oath, hoping she would help him find a way out. Instead of alerting the elders or warning Abeni, she had chosen silence, choosing her own security over justice. She had not made the oath, but she had benefited from it knowingly. The ancestors, it seemed, were precise in their accounting. By sunset, the girl had left the village, walking the same road Sadiq once had walked with such confidence. Abeni watched her go and felt a complicated mixture of pity and satisfaction. That evening, she slept deeply for the first time in months and woke up to find her strength had returned. Her body felt solid again, real, hers. The healing came not all at once, but in waves that built steadily over days. Abeni woke one morning and realized she had slept through the entire night without dreams of drums in coffins or sand in her throat. Her appetite returned gradually. First, water tasted clean again, then fruit tasted sweet. Then she found herself hungry for meals instead of forcing food down. The coughing stopped. Her reflection in water stayed still and clear, showing her own face instead of turning away or showing someone she did not recognize. Color returned to her skin. Strength returned to her limbs. The hollow look in her eyes filled with something that resembled peace, though harder earned and more cautious than innocence. The village noticed. How could they not? Abeni moved through the market again, and this time people stepped aside, not from fear or pity, but from a respect they could not quite name. Women who had avoided her now approached cautiously, asking her counsel on matters they once would have taken to Sadiq. Young girls looked at her differently, not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that survival was possible, that being broken did not mean staying broken forever. The elders came to her compound again, this time with offerings instead of questions. They asked their forgiveness for their blindness, for approving Sadiq's marriage without investigating properly, for assuming she had deserved abandonment. Abeni accepted their words, but refused their offerings. "Your guilt cannot buy my peace," she said quietly. "Keep your offerings. Instead, ensure this never happens to another woman in silence." They promised. Whether they would keep that promise remained to be seen. Within a moon cycle, the village council had established new laws, carved in wood and placed at the center of the square where everyone could see. No marriage could be approved without both parties speaking freely before witnesses who knew them well. Any oath made to spirits for personal gain must be disclosed publicly or be considered void and dangerous. Women abandoned by husbands would no longer be assumed to have spiritual defects. Instead, the circumstances would be investigated thoroughly. Complaints about powerful men would be heard with the same weight as complaints about anyone else. The laws were not perfect, and Abeni knew enforcement would be inconsistent, but they existed now. A line had been drawn, a precedent set. Other villages heard about what happened and sent representatives to ask questions. How had Abeni survived? What power had she called upon? Was there a ritual others could learn? The shrine woman, when asked, would only say she did nothing but refuse to forgive what was unforgivable. The ancestors did the rest because they recognized truth when humans refused to see it. 3 moons after Sadiq's collapse, the village held a council to honor Abeni formally. They offered her a seat among the elders, a position of authority and respect. They offered her land, wealth, status, all the things that had been given to Sadiq and should have been shared with her. They offered her power. Abeni stood before them all and did something nobody expected. "I refuse," Abeni said clearly, her voice carrying across the assembly. A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. The head elder leaned forward, confused. "You refuse honor after everything you have endured?" "I refuse power that is only offered because of pain," Abeni clarified. You give me these things not because you recognize my worth, but because you fear what happened to Sadiq might happen to others who wrong me. You offer me a seat at the table you once denied me, not from justice, but from terror. She looked around at the faces watching her, some ashamed, some defensive, some genuinely confused. If you want to honor me, do not make me exceptional. Do not turn my survival into a cautionary tale that still centers a man's downfall. Instead, treat every woman in this village as if she has already survived what I survived. Give them the respect and hearing you are offering me now before they are broken enough to require it. The silence was absolute. I do not want to sit among elders who needed ancestors to teach them what basic dignity requires. I do not want power built on the foundation of my humiliation. She turned toward the forest path, the same path that had led her to the shrine. I am going back to the river to rebuild my life on my own terms. That is honor enough. Before anyone could respond, Abeni walked away from the assembly, away from the offered power, toward the sound of running water that had finally learned to reflect her face again. Months passed. Sadiq's compound was torn down, the materials distributed to families who needed them. His grave, if you could call it that, was marked with an unmarked stone in an empty field, neither honored nor mourned. The young wife was never seen again, though rumors placed her in a distant village, living as a servant in her brother's house. The shrine woman returned to her forest, appearing only when another desperate soul sought her guidance. And Abeni built a small home by the river, simple and steady, surrounded by vegetables she planted herself. She lived alone, but was not lonely. Women visited her regularly, especially those navigating difficult marriages or facing abandonment or struggling under the weight of expectations that crushed them slowly. She offered no magic, no dramatic interventions, just listening, advice, and the steady reminder that survival was possible, that their worth was not determined by who claimed them or discarded them. The village in time gave her a praise name. It happened organically, the way these things do. Someone said it once, then others repeated it, until it became more real than her birth name. They called her Idahun, she who survived truth, because that is what she had done. Not survived betrayal, or humiliation, or even near death. She had survived the moment when truth was offered, and she had chosen not to deny it, not to forgive it away, but to let it stand and do its work. The storyteller pauses here, letting the fire crackle, watching faces in the flickering light process the weight of what they have heard. The storyteller leans forward, voice dropping to that intimate tone reserved for the most important truths. Listen carefully to what this tale teaches, she says, making eye contact with each person around the fire. A man may escape people, their judgment, their anger, their consequences. He may lie convincingly, he may manipulate successfully, he may build walls of money and status that shield him from earthly justice, but he can never, ever escape the ancestors. She pauses, letting the words settle like stones in still water. The ancestors are patient. They watch, they wait, they remember every tear shed in secret, every humiliation borne in silence, every woman whose spirit was consumed to feed a man's ambition. And when the debt is full, they collect, not in whispers or shadows, but publicly, completely, in ways that reveal every hidden truth. The fire pops, sending sparks into the night sky. Abeni's power was not in cursing Sadiq. It was in refusing to save him from his own choices. She understood something crucial, that forgiveness forced too early is just another way of protecting the guilty and silencing the wronged. That some debts must be paid on full. The storyteller sits back, her voice returning to normal volume. So I ask you now, those listening by this fire, if you are Abeni, standing at that river with the bowl of water in your hands, knowing one word could end it all, would you have forgiven him, or would you have let justice finish its work? the fire crackles. The question hangs in the air, unanswered and unanswerable, as it should be. And the story, like all good stories, does not tell you what to think. It simply asks you to decide.